there is different layers, different stakeholders from the industry involved in that equation. It's not just a matter of building cables, right? You need more than cable. Portugal was historically well known by being a country with many cables, but they never changed their own data inside the country. So Portugal was seen as the corridor between whatever the cable was coming from to Madrid, right? So that's why Spain gained the momentum that Portugal is trying to gain now. All the cables on the west coast of Africa, or most of the cables, were affected, but the Google cable was not affected. And so eventually, Angola survived itself, or was able to reroute traffic up to Europe using part of the capacity on Equiano.
So, hi everyone, welcome back. Today we have a very special guest with us, Darwin Costa. Joining us too is André Cavaco, my co-host at Africa Tech Talks. The episode today is dedicated to talk about a very important topic here in the continent, which is, once again, infrastructure, communications, and specifically, we're going to talk about the Equiano Subsea Cable, a recent project of Google. So, Darwin, welcome back. First of all, welcome to our podcast once again.
Hi guys, hi Ivo, hi Andre. It's always a pleasure being here. Thanks a lot for the invitation again. Thank you.
Okay, Darwin. So let's start with our first question. So, can you tell us a little bit about the existing subsea cable network that we have in Angola? When they started, what is its lifespan, capability, or capacity? Tell us a little bit more of the current infrastructure in subsea cables, please.
Yeah, sure. So for the audience, one of the main reasons we are talking today about subsea cables is exactly because of 95% of the communications goes through those big pipes under the ocean, if you don't know, right? And then eventually we do have some areas to be covered where fiber doesn't reach out. And so in today's podcast, we will touch a little bit on not only on Oceano, but on the cables in the continent itself. And so currently in Angola, the country has a couple of cables landing in the country. The first cable, which was implemented back in 2001, was a cable called SAT3. SAT3 lands in a landing station. We call it CLS, which is Cable Landing Station. In Cacoaco, the same cable is being managed by Angola Telecom. And then eventually, as the demand and the appetite for digital services were growing within the country, there was a need of another cable. And so back then in 2012, there was the West African Cable System. WACS was implemented in 2012. And strategically, the cable was landing then in the Sangano beach, which on the other part of the city, right? Landing not on the same same basket where SAT3 was, just to make redundancy on the services and also on the gateways for in and outbound connectivity into the country, right? And so in 2012, then WACS was implemented, and a few years later, there was this promising project from South Atlantic Cable from Angola, which Angola was fully involved and in building a cable by themselves. And the company which did that was Angola Cables, and they were building a cable from Luanda to Fortaleza. And just also for our audience, it's important to mention one thing. Normally those cables. So I already mentioned three, right? So the initial two ones, SAT3 and WACS, normally they are on a consortium-based model, which means to say that many parties have different shares within the system. But what Angola did differently while building the South Atlantic cable system was building the cable by themselves, a cable with 40 terabits of capacity. if you ask ourselves where was there a need in building that cable, I could argue still on today's saying that yes, there was a need for us to have a direct communication with Brazil, and it's not only about digital infrastructure at the end of the day, but Angola and Brazil do share a lot of culture similarities because of the past, right? And so with this cable, we did avoid our users in Angola to watch global novellas by going all the way up to Europe and then North America and then going down to South America, right? And fast forward, and the appetite is growing. Everybody's using TikTok, Instagram, uploading massive content. We're doing YouTube and other platforms that the appetite needs to be satisfied, right? And so eventually there were two new announcements for two new cables to Africa, which is owned and managed by Meta, and then Google with the Keanu cable, which is also coming along.
Okay, great. So the Equiano cable is so this is a new cable. I did a little research on this, and this it enables a design. Uh, it provides a capacity of 144 terabits per second, right? Which is almost 20 times greater than the previous cable serving the region. So this is a complete. I don't know. This is a complete overall, and so this new technology enables a much more bandwidth to the region. And you said earlier, was it the SAT3 cable or the wax cable? These cables are reaching like it's their life cycle, their maturity, so to speak.
Yeah.
Their lifetime is what, 20, 25, 30 years, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's important to mention, Ivo, and thanks for highlighting that. It's important for our audience to know that, a cable, once it's laid down under the ocean, a cable has roughly 20 up to 25 years to be alive, right? Until there is no more activities on it. Um, that's on the technical side of the things. And one important point to mention as well is that on the commercial slash business side of the things, it's very, very important that whomever the owners, whether it's a single shareholder, whether it's multiple consortium members, that you are able to sell your capacity on the initial 5 years. And why is that? Because the price will then depreciate after the initial 5 years, right? So that's the commercial part of the subsea cable. But yes, going back to your question, SAT3 is already 21 years old, less than a terabit capacity. So it means to say that it will be dead within the next years, or it will be offline within the next years, and eventually what Angola did good with WAX, with SACs, and now with the announcement of To Africa for this year as well, was to add some capacity on top of it, right? So we're going to have roughly, once To Africa is totally operational, we're going to have like 60 terabits per second implemented, and we're going to lose like less than a terabit, right? We can afford that. I mean, it's less than a terabit, but we should prepare ourselves for what is coming up next, right? And everybody's talking about AI and training models here and there, LLMs with the large language models and so on and so forth. So definitely, the more cables, the better. So we as a country can definitely be prepared for what the future holds us.
Okay, interesting. I'm also reading here that by 2025, so it's this year, the Equiano cable could contribute roughly 10 billion US dollars to Africa's GDP. So through enhanced productivity and new digital industries. This came out of a 2021 economic impact assessment, and it stated that just in Togo alone, which is one of the places that the cable will land, right? It will create indirectly more than 37,000 jobs just in Togo, right? And in South Africa,
Right.
the retail internet prices are expected to drop by 14%. So this is potentially very good news to everyone, to every single country, that will kind of connect directly to this cable. And this takes me to my next question, which is because some people mainly from Angola, they ask this. Angola is a big country. It has a big shore line, right? Shore coasts. Um,
Right.
why should this cable land once again near or in the capital Luanda and not in the south of the country, like in Namib? Is there a reason for that? Does it make sense?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, right? And if you recall, I mentioned in the beginning of of the podcast, I actually mentioned that we shouldn't put tanks on the same basket, right? We shouldn't put the same eggs on the same basket just to avoid any kind of outage, global outages within the country, and that the country is totally dependent on Luanda itself, which is the capital. But there are multiple factors which we need to take into consideration, and we can argue with that. I mean, I'm not Mr. Right one, but at least I have some knowledge which can be shared. But the thing is, so we spoke about South 3, and then eventually Meta with 2 Africa is also landing in Kakuako. And then eventually you have Wax and Sax landing in Cabuledo, in Sangano, right? So those two paths are already distinct one from the other, right? But what we shouldn't forget is that the way to Sangano Beach has a bridge, right? And so we have a lot of cables, terrestrial cables, which are going from the city center to Sangano. But hypothetically speaking, let's just imagine that something happens with the Kwanzaa Bridge. What do you think is going to happen? So the entire bandwidth Swift will migrate to the Meta cable or the SAT3, which is still alive, right? So the country gateway, it's going to be focused in Kakuaku, right? And the same might happen on the other hand. And so the question that I often hear and get asked is, Darren, okay, so now enough with the cables in Luanda. So why don't we do any kind of activities in the south? First of all, people need to understand that a cable is a huge investment. Laying a cable in any country is a huge investment. We are talking more than 100, 200,000, 300,000 to lay a million, sorry, not thousands, millions to lend not the cable, but to lend something we call it the BU, which means a branch unit, right? So you lend a branch unit into your coast, and then eventually the capacity will reach the branch unit. And I saw the last podcast with Fabio, right, on data centers, and eventually we need to bring this capacity to neutral data centers facilities. But it's not only about neutral data center facilities, it's also locations, whether they're neutral or not, where you can move the traffic from A to B, right? And so this will bring me to something I wanted to answer immediately, but I just left for now, just to say that the factors that we need to create, it's not only about building the infrastructure, but it's also the business factor, right? So is there any business on the south? Are there any internet users in the south comparing to Angola, which will then eventually resonate or pay the bills from whatever branch unit we're going to place there, right? So it always to have economics, had some economics, you know, the business case associated to it, the strategic, because sometimes it's not only the economics. If the government says, listen, we need to create some new jobs in the south, let's do it, right? We need to land there. Okay, so someone is backing that up. You know what I mean? But if you land a cable like that, with this massive capacity, the economics are the first thing you want to look into it.
During just on that, and considering the corridor of Lobito or Lobito corridor,
Right.
considering also and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've seen and heard, they also have a fiber line throughout all the line till it reaches Congo. So isn't it possible also that this can be viable using that landing point in Lubito, and then it can go from there to Congo and affect more population and be more viable?
Yeah, you're totally right, Andre. I mean, that's also a different way of looking into the coin, right? A coin has two sides. So if you drop one side of the coin in Luanda and you drop the other side of the coin in Lubito, why not? I mean, the business model which wants to be created around Lubito is massive, is huge, right? At least from the news that I'm seeing and reading, right? And so eventually digital will follow up. Jobs will be created, right? So, and we go back again to the economics. If it makes sense, then I would drop a branch unit in there, definitely.
Kendra, now I know you love subsea cables, but you also love satellites. So, and you do. So I think
I do.
you definitely have a question about satellites.
Yeah, this last episode he teased us with the satellites, and this made us think because the business models are also going to be disrupted probably with the new technologies he mentioned, not only Starlink but also the network from Amazon. I think it's going to be something Origin. I don't know yet very well. Blue Origin, it's the enterprise that is sending the satellites. Um, how critical are these subsea cables um, versus the satellites, and how do they complement each other?
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point, Andre. I think everybody likes to, we are entitled. Everybody's entitled to have their own opinion, like we have our own opinion. And but when it comes to satellite, I see people, trying to block their own business, and oh, this will disrupt everything. I think at the end of the day, one thing will complement the other, right? I mean, I keep saying I'm a cable guy. There is nothing which will kill the speed of light. And what I can get here at home, like 1 gig connectivity, being a known user sitting in the Netherlands, it's just amazing. It's massive. But obviously, if I want to plan a trip with my family from the Netherlands to go down to Portugal, then eventually, if I have a Starlink device on top of my car, I can get connectivity everywhere. Right? I can get connectivity everywhere. And I think for Africa, if we look into the size of the continent, it's just massive to cover everything by fiber. I wouldn't call it impossible. I would say it's just too large. It's just too much. Obviously, we need to do the needful to get there. But until you don't get there, and if we might still speaking about the south of Angola, so if I'm a farmer, why should I wait ages to get fiber into my farm? You know, why can't I just purchase a Starlink device and start doing sending my data to A to B, or exchange my data with my financing guy sitting in Luanda in the capital, right? So I will say one thing will complement the other, and obviously it's totally disruptive, but I think we as a human beings will learn from history as well. We are very good when we are challenged, right? And so every challenge will come with a benefit, with a downside. I think we just need to pick up the good things and take it from there.
Okay. So you believe that there's going to be a blended model that is going to be used in this case, and we're going to use both technologies to fill in the gaps, and that's your take on this. Last episode that we talked, you mentioned that I think 7 cables were landing in Portugal, so they were going to be prepared for the next 15 years, something like that. I don't have my notes yet here right now. But let's focus on Africa. And we have here, and you've been kind to share with us the top African countries with submarine cables, including Angola. And you put here Egypt with 15, South Africa with 12, as the audience can see right now. And in the end, you put Angola with 2. How does the future looks like from the actual reality?
Yeah, so one other good point, that I like to debate about it, with my fellow colleagues on the telecommunications industry, is really when it comes down to, to an hub. Everybody talks about, oh, we're going to become the next big hub in Africa. Oh, we're going to be the next big hub. Everybody wants to be a hub. Yes, obviously. You might first you need to have a vision, right? And then you need to find out how to get there, right? And then one of the things that I when I was putting those numbers together, which grabbed my attention was like, Egypt has 15 cables. That's massive for an African country. It's massive, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Portugal has 17 and 5 more to come, something like to that regard. So if you compare number apples to apples, I wouldn't say that Egypt is doing that badly, right? I mean, they're doing a great job. Even South Africa, there are 12 cables landing in there, right? But if you then ask me the question, hey, Darwin, do you think Egypt is the hub in Africa or is South Africa the hub in Africa? And then the question is straightforward. South Africa is the main hub in Africa. And again, we go back to the factors, right? And to the different layers of building an internet ecosystem. It's not only the subsea cables. You need to have a lot of data center facilities. You know, funny enough, nowadays in the past we talked about building data center facilities. Nowadays we are talking about power to sustain
Yeah.
all these data center facilities that are being built.
AI,
And so yeah, exactly.
nuclear energy.
Exactly. Exactly, and those are layers on top of layers. But my point is, looking to the graph again, South Africa is the largest hub in Africa so far. It's being followed very close from Nigeria and then Kenya, right? And then eventually you see Kenya in the fourth place when it comes to cables. But they have one thing which, at least South Africa has one thing which grabbed the attention from every single cloud provider, every single network service provider, every single ISP. They were looking into South Africa, to South Africa like an hub and a place to do business, digital business, right? So infrastructure was being built, internet exchange points, which are one of the main values for that exchange between networks. The largest one is based in South Africa. It's called Map of Africa, based in Johannesburg. And then eventually the next one, the next big internet exchange point, is located in Nigeria, in Lagos. It's called IXPN. So eventually, to make all of these things works, there is different layers, different stakeholders from the industry involved in that equation. It's not just a matter of building cables, right? You need more than cables. And I think on the last edition we talked about Portugal. Portugal was historically well known by being a country with many cables, but they never changed their own data inside the country. So Portugal was seen as the corridor between whatever the cable was coming from to Madrid, right? So that's why Spain gained the momentum that Portugal is trying to gain now.
Okay, so it's not just about having the cables, having the capacity in the cables, but also what kind of ecosystem, mainly through energy generation. And that's, I think, it's a very important point, making the right data centers and bringing the capacities. As you mentioned, Spain brought a lot of capacity into the scene, and that's why they reached this momentum.
Sure.
I think that Ivo has a question.
How do you know this? How do you know
The
this?
house here.
Are we sharing
I'm
with
going
the
to
questions?
test the
How do you know this in advance?
I don't know.
Yeah. So Darwin, this of course is a topic that we love to talk, because this is one of the main. It's like it sets the pipes, the plumbing of the communications in the world. Without this, I think you said it before, 98 or 99% of communications worldwide, they go through the sea cables, right? So some people don't know this, but these cables, this type of infrastructure is critical for the modern era that we live in. The world is advancing we have new technologies, 5G,
Right.
Internet of Things, AI is a big thing now, of course, demanding even more energy for the new LLMs, the new models. I think today, or Elon Musk or XAI, they're going to announce the new Grok 3 um, AI. OpenAI is coming out with something pretty soon too. A couple of weeks ago, we've seen the DeepSeek one from China. Everyone went crazy about it. Um, but tell me, so we have these the cables, everything that enables this for us to stay interconnected. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is so good about this specific cable from Google, Equiano, the technology innovation that it has? I don't know. I'm thinking I don't know if it exists or is contemplated. Is there any way to do, for instance, subsea maintenance or repairs with autonomous underwater vehicles nowadays, or it's just a more manual thing? Um, what kind of technologies and enhancements can we expect from these new cables, new generation cables?
Yeah. Yeah, so I will do I will try to split the question into multiple answers, but a cable is a cable. It has the distance from A to B. I mean, kilometers here and there. But one thing I really liked on the Equiano cable, personally, again, right? One thing I really like it. Also analyzing a lot of breakouts we had 2 years ago in Angola, for instance, on the subsea cables. One thing they did, which was totally differently, obviously they go from South Africa up to Portugal, which the other cables also do. But one thing they did differently was to follow a different path under the water, which was not, for instance, affected by the Congo Canyon. So I don't know if you guys heard about that, but there was an issue in Congo because of the Congo Canyon, and many cables were cut it off, and without any activity for even for a month, because you mentioned something about the repair. Those ships that do the repair, they take long days to reach the problem point in terms of geographically, right? So they need to move maybe from South Africa all the way up to Congo to try to fix the problems. And obviously, we don't have guys going down the water trying to fix the problem. There is robots that go down and they pick up the cable. We bring up the cable up to the boat, and then the splices replace it. Everything is done, and then we lay the cable down again into the water. But one thing which really took me to surprise was that all the cables on the west coast of Africa, or most of the cables, were affected, but the Google cable was not affected. And so eventually, Angola survived itself, though was able to reroute traffic up to Europe using part of the capacity on Equiano, but also sending part of the capacity to Brazil, and from Brazil back to Europe. Obviously, there is a huge latency when you do that, right? But at those kind of moments, you just want to be online, right? So the explanation why is it taking longer or not, this will come, but the main focus of every company carrier, which provide internet services, is just to have their customers online, and that's what Angola did. And I still can remember that Congo was offline as well, and they were rerouting their traffic through us and from Angola to Fortaleza, and then eventually from Fortaleza it went up to North America, or it went straight to Lisbon with another cable, which is existing nowadays. But yes, it's on the digital era that we live nowadays. It's very critical to have, or to have people online, to have users online. Obviously things will happen, and I think one of the big differences that Google did was not to follow the same path than the other cables did.
Okay, so there was a design, so to speak, a planning slash design decision. So they didn't use the same routes or physical placement of the cable, and that
Right.
for that specific
Yeah.
incident, Was that a seismic incident or something like that? Some
Seismic
okay,
incident. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So the
Actually, what you just said, Ivo, is called a desktop survey. So that's a survey that you do before you lay any kind of cables under the water, right?
okay. So this is was one of the differentiators. And what about other types of technologies that are inherently in this new cable that are worth mentioning? Can you remember and tell us a little bit more?
Okay, so yeah, Ivo, these new cables, they are bringing different technologies into the playground. The Meta cable, for instance, the Two Africa cable. Is the first one using a special division multiplexer. And has more fiber pairs into it. And also gives the ability to provide more terabits of services to the different countries and partners which are part of the consortium, for instance. So yeah, it all comes down into how many capacity can you fit into a cable, right? And how many capacity can you allocate to the different countries where you're gonna have a branch unit. Obviously, this is again we go back to economics, but obviously not each and every country has the same capacity. It really depends on the investment that such a country A has done or country B has done.
Okay, so at the end of the day, it's not just the cable by itself existing, and the countries will reap all the benefits. It will depend also on each country, the investments that they need to do in order to bring that capacity
Yep.
to the country, right? So right now, Angola is already doing something regarding that, or how are things going? Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, so from what I know is that To Africa is going to be landing in Angola this year still. I'm not quite sure about the which quarter because the landing partner still needs to build the landing station, the cable landing station. And from Equiano, I think there was something on the newspaper, right, that an investment has been approved or an investment has been granted by the government of Angola. And I think Angola Telecom is going to be the landing party for that specific branch unit. I have not had the information on when the cable will land or how much capacity will be allocated into Angola. But I think this is what we're going to be following up next, because it's very important for us to know, how many additional capacity will Angola have and how many additional capacity can we put into our new calculations, right? So eventually we might have a new podcast in the future regarding
Yeah,
that.
for sure. So you were I think it was the other day, right? This was what motivated this the today's episode was you sharing something from last year that the Angola government was doing a substantial investment through Angola Telecom, right, to bring the or to build the necessary infrastructure on land to bring this capacity of Cuyano cable. So just to sum it up, with this new Equiano cable, we will have more capacity. So this cable is like 144 terabits capacity. Supposedly, we lower latency, communicating with the rest of the world, right? And we have more redundancy. So if you currently have or are connected to main cables, we have a third one to rely on, right? Um, Darwin,
Right.
listen, thank you once again to coming on the pod. You're a dear friend of ours. We'll invite you again to talk about more topics. Thank you once again for sharing your knowledge and insights with the audience. We love you. Come back, please. And if everyone who is listening, thank you all. Subscribe, like our podcasts, follow us on social media, go on LinkedIn, we have a new Substack page. Please do go and follow and like our articles. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Darwin and Andre. Also, thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Much appreciated.
Thank you, guys.